Welcome in to another episode of Getting Aligned. My name is Mark Mira, CEO of Aligned. This time I'm joined by Zach Newburgh, who has an illustrious career in the computer engineering space. So, another conversation with us, this time about more internal negotiation, resource management, product development, and the internal tension you may face in a large corporate as well as in a startup scene with founders, sales individuals, and so on. So, Zach, I'll pass it over to you to give an introduction of yourself.
Great. First of all, so great to be here, Mark. A little bit about me, going all the way back to college. I studied Arabic and was recruiting for a three-letter government agency to work in clandestine operations abroad. I was really excited about that career path being a positive cog in a really big machine. And then after a series of interviews in a bunch of different locations, the DMV didn't end up calling me back. So I ended up moving into startups. After bussing tables at some restaurants, I landed in a startup in sales and accounts, and then slowly ended up finding and transitioning into software engineering. And it's been a great ride over the last almost 10 years of being in engineering. The industry has changed enormously. I was lucky that when I transitioned in engineering, I was with Blackrock, the big asset management firm, right out of the gate, and then have since been in a few different roles. Well, at Blackrock in engineering leadership, and then taking a head of engineering role at a startup called Onaroll, where we raised money from pre-seed, seed to Series A, recruited my successor, and then jumped over to a company that I work for now called Cinder, in trust and safety.
Very cool. You speak multiple languages, right? How many languages do you speak?
Uh,
Don't be humble. It's fine.
yeah, so I speak a good number of them, different levels of fluency. I mean, at different points, I used to say that I spoke Arabic, Hebrew, French, Spanish.
And English, I
And
would
I'm still
imagine.
working on English.
Yeah.
But smatterings of Russian, Swedish, German, and then a bunch of coding languages.
I was going to say, do you feel like knowing foreign languages helped you learn computer languages?
I mean, absolutely. Every language, whether it's a machine or it's a human spoken language or written language, I mean, they all have patterns that you need to follow. And the whole purpose is to be able to communicate effectively and build trust with whoever it is that you're working for. So whether or not you're putting an input into ChatGPT or Claude or Cursor or whatever it might be that you'd use for coding, whether you're using natural language, which is kind of the language that we use, humans speaking person to person, or it's writing Python or Java or Go or Rust or whatever it might be, that's just providing instructions to somebody else who's the recipient. And so, interestingly, one of the things that I love most about languages, and in particular studying Arabic, which was, I think, my first kind of love of I just loved learning it, the sound and the grammar and the various expressions that there are that can't really communicate or translate easily into English. For that, a lot of that, I think, communicates something that goes beyond instruction, which I think is relevant for negotiation. It helps to build trust. And so when I find myself meeting with somebody who speaks Arabic and the first words out of my mouth are in Arabic instead of English, the excitement that they get, the way that their face lights up is just so exciting for me, and I think for them too.
And that's one of the biggest things that we talk about from a negotiation standpoint. Like when people think of negotiation, think kind of like stuffy suits, deal making, contracts, red, blue, and black ink. But at the end of the day, it's just really how we communicate with each other. So
For sure.
our core philosophy on communication is effective when intent and interpretation are the exact same thing. So if the message I send to you, the intention I send to you lands in a way that you interpret 100%, we've communicated really effectively. And I love what you talked about. We communicate in a way to build trust, and we kind of feel the same exact thing. If my intent is to piss you off and you're pissed off, I did it.
Right,
If my
exactly.
intent is to inject some humor to break tension because I'm uncomfortable and you're pissed off, I didn't do it. And that's where a lot of this communication breakdown happens. Like, we don't think miscommunication is a thing. It's a bit of a cop-out. It's kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Misinterpretation is a thing.
Huh.
So are there any other insights that you have from a communication standpoint, whether it be communicating with humans or communicating with machines, that you've been able to kind of uncover or develop over the years?
In engineering, we often talk about how it is that we achieve the outcomes. We're constantly focused on shipping outcomes for our customers or stakeholders, whomever they be, whether they're external or internal. And the question that I often get from the people who are managing me or people who are managing the managers of me, of myself, is that what's the outcome that you're going to ship? They don't really care about the instructions that are given to the computer. They care about what the value is. And so when I'm communicating with them, I have to reframe what it is that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to to share what they're going to get out of it and why that matters. On the engineering side, we then talk about, okay, how is it that we're going to achieve the outcome? And there's a negotiation internally about using some of our kind of boundaries of how much time do we have, how many people do we have, how much can we produce with the people during the time that we have and given our systems constraints. And the something that often comes up is this idea of technical debt. Think of it like a mortgage, where we are buying ourselves time so that we can eventually build the system that we want in all of the various ways that we want it to manifest so that it can be sustainable and handle high scale. But sometimes you have to take shortcuts. Kind of like when you're buying a house, you need to take on debt because you don't have the money, and so it buys you time to be able to ultimately pay down that debt so that you can keep the house. So it's similar here. We do that with technical debt, and that negotiation happens internally with the engineers. The ultimate outcome being that we need to ship value for our customers so that we have enough time to eventually pay down the technical debt, whose interest we're constantly paying.
I'm going to get back to the technical debt piece because I'm sure there's some really interesting decisions you've had to make internally of when do we continue to add on to this technical debt and when do we decide it's more important for us to wipe the entire slate clean
Sure.
and build brand new all the way back up. I want to get to that. But first I want to talk about we have to think about the end in mind. And I think there's a really insightful piece of communication there that you just gave us from an engineering standpoint of if I don't think about the outcome we're trying to get, it doesn't make sense for me to think about what I'm doing before that. And I don't think a lot of
Right.
people really focus on that. They go into conversations thinking about what they're going to say, but they don't go into conversations thinking about what is the other person going to hear and what outcome do I want as a result of it. It could be a conversation with your spouse of, who's going to take the dog out in the morning. It could be a really, really interesting conversation internally about resource management, staffing, and technical debt. So can you kind of walk me through your process on how do we determine what the outcome is? And then how do we work backwards from there from an engineering lens in order to get there and then deliver that internally to internal stakeholders?
Yeah. So I've been very lucky to work at a bunch of places where we had guiding principles as the base by which we choose to operate. And I think the objectives and key results framework is a really good starting point to help ensure that people are aligned across an organization. And so on the engineering team, we take those instructions from leadership and try to color or fill in the gaps to understand how engineering can best impact or move the needles on those fronts. And so when we have conversations about what the outcome is, taking into account the constraints that we have, it's always framed back to the alignment that leadership has provided and empowered us with helping them achieve.
As far as that thought process is really important of thinking about the output the internal team needs to receive. Once we align on the output, this is what's going to get shipped. This is what's going to get delivered. Now you can work backwards from that point to develop everything from there. We think that's a really effective way to think about communication in general. Think about the result you want. Think about the outcome you're looking for. Work backwards from there.
Right. So so we take those high level objectives and key results, take that back to the team, figure out how we can contribute. There's a back and forth, a negotiation that happens to make sure that we are aligned with the ways in which we'll fill in those gaps. And then we implement or we execute. So a really important thing for us is to be really clear about what we are going to produce and be on the hook for so that we can continue to make the process better. Knowing that for us, that negotiation isn't zero sum. It is a constant and evolving and, going back to some of our points earlier around relationship building. I mean, this is, fundamentally the important piece to keep in mind.
Our golden rule as it relates to communicators, not just negotiators, is the best communicators are clear, assertive, and respectful. So you
Mm.
kind of led with clear. We have to be clear. We're engineers. It has to be very specific. The output has to be clear. Everyone needs to be aligned on that objective. So now let's get back to the technical debt piece. I'm sure there's been moments in your life, in your career, whether your direct role or teams you've sat on, where you've said to yourself, this is all the technical debt we've accumulated over the years, but for us to get to the aspirational place we want to be with this product, we got to cut ties and delete all of it and make something brand new. So have there been moments in your career where you've had to A, make that decision, and B, communicate that decision internally?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not exactly that directly about deleting everything and replacing
course.
it. We often talk about what's the expression where you're flying the airplane as you're building it. That's or driving the car while it's being built. I mean, that is constantly what we're doing. It's not very common when things are wholesale replaced. Some of the things that we think about with technical debt is the debt that we're taking on a one-way door? How hard will it be for us to make those mortgage payments? And so our goal as a team is always to make sure that our product is sustainable, maintainable, that if we ever had to back ourselves out of something that we did, that backing out is that backing out can be achieved. And so we constantly think about de-risking or mitigating as much risk as we possibly can so that we're able to provide, I guess, clarity on what it is that we're trying to ship.
How does that tension work internally then, right? So if you're de-risking, I would assume you're taking a slightly more conservative approach to development, engineering, et cetera. But I'm sure on the other side of that spectrum internally, you got sales, growth, revenue.
Yeah.
That is like, give me all the risk you got. We got to give them the best, coolest features. We got to put together the coolest marketing deck. We can talk about features we haven't even built yet, as long as we think we can build it at some point in the future. So how does that tension happen internally where you're saying, de-risk, be conservative, think about the output in mind. We know what we need to ship to, yeah, but is it cool and sexy and can we sell it?
Yeah, right. I mean, this is the classic tension. I'd say a few things. One, we provide trade-offs. So we say, in this time frame, this is what we can build and ship and feel confident in. Two, there's often a trade-off of reputational risk or customer success, which is if we build this thing too quickly, the outcome for that might be that we actually lose the customer that we were trying to gain by building it too quickly. And so there's that. The third piece is having to do mostly with, if we build this too quickly, then the result of that could be that it hampers our ability to build for other potential customers or existing customers because we've made our system inflexible. And so the piece here is, I like what you said. I forgot the third piece of it, being clear, assertive,
Respectful.
and respectful. Yeah, so we carry all of those three things in everything that we do, I hope, which is to make sure we're very clear about the trade-offs that we're going to face both in building the thing and also what the result of that could be if we build things too quickly. Two, not being wishy-washy about what we're sharing, being very assertive and on top of our counterparts in whether it's product or customer success or growth. And then the third thing, having dad brain, is
Respectful.
respectful.
Good relationships.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we are going to be working with these people over and over and over again. So if we're jerks about it, I don't think that serves anybody. And that's not to say that we're not ever jerks. There are often high stakes. But I think at the base of it all is we're all looking for the same outcome, which is we want more revenue with fewer expenses, and we want to achieve that at a faster rate than any of our competitors. So yeah, I mean, that's where it's really important we're all aligned. And
I'm really happy you kind of put that all together, because when we ask individuals what's more challenging, external negotiation, suppliers, vendors, customers, etc., and internal negotiation, 65 to 75% of people will say internal negotiation is more challenging. And you eloquently put it together by saying we're all pulling in the same direction. We all, at the end of the day, want the same output, but how we get there matters, and how we get there might be different. Customer success might want the thing that they are presented by their customers all the time as a problem that they want to solve.
Hmm.
But they don't know how to solve it. They're just trying to triage it as best they can. Sales wants a new sexy shiny thing that they can sell to prospective customers. Engineering wants something that is stable, reliable, de-risked, that they know they can confidently ship. And of course, the executive team wants profitability as fast as humanly possible. So that's a lot of internal tension from a team that is interdependent on success.
Yeah.
And that's a really challenging dynamic. So have there been some conversations you've had internally where maybe yourself leading an engineering team has to challenge the revenue team or the founder on pace, features that we can build or ship, maybe a problem that has arisen? And how do you tend to handle that difficult conversation?
I have been on teams where what I took for granted as the piece about increasing revenue, decreasing expenses, and doing that faster than any of our competitors, I took that for granted, that everybody was on the same page about it. Where I've seen teams fail is when there are some people who are more self-interested in climbing through the ranks and getting visibility than being part of the team, whether that's the local team, the engineering team, or that is the broader team of growth and customer success and product and engineering all working hand in hand. And so I've been on teams where that's the case, and they just sputter, and you lose people. I don't think anybody wants to work with somebody who is not in it for the entire group. So going back to your other question about whether I've dealt with situations and how I approach handling hard conversations with whether it's CEOs or members of the founding team or other folks who are department heads or leaders or tech leads or whatever it may be. Yeah, I mean, all the time. What I often find is the piece where there's kind of conflict is we just haven't communicated enough about what it is that we're going to produce, or talk about the trade-offs, the cost and benefit of what it is, or maybe the vision just isn't simply shared. And so sometimes realigning on that foundational vision of what we're trying to all achieve together is a really good reset or reorientation, and has been for me, to be able to then help target the trade-offs that we should be looking at so that we can achieve our own goal.
It opens up a door that we talk about often, and that's communication is really what drives a conversation forward. Right, so some leaders maybe don't lead with trust. Maybe they got burned in the past. Everyone kind of is carrying their own emotional baggage, their own experiences, where maybe they're not communicating enough. And we have this kind of phrase that we like to talk about with conflict and tension is time heals all wounds. I disagree with that. I don't think time heals wounds. I think communication heals wounds. Communication is what brings us together. So almost in the sense of over communicating and overly expressing our intent allows us to identify where those trade-offs are, understand where interests can be complementary and where interests are in direct conflict.
Yes.
Because if we don't do that well enough, vague doesn't help anybody. And if we're holding our cards too close to our vest and we're not sharing, then we're just going to get entrenched in our positions. We'll assume people know what we want to do. Like you mentioned before, you assume everyone wants to increase revenue, decrease expenses, and get there faster than our competitors, but that isn't always the case. We've all been around the high-performing jerk,
right,
instead of the team player that wants all the boats to rise, quote unquote.
Right.
So that observation you have of communication and the fact that we need to over-communicate is something that I don't think a lot of organizations do. Did you notice maybe a discrepancy on that in large institutions you were working at versus maybe smaller founding teams? Are there similarities? How well do these teams communicate?
Yeah, so there's a lot more pressure, obviously, on smaller teams to be able to make sure that they're communicating in a lot of different ways, and to have that communication be very effective. What I think about is being at a big organization, experienced a time when ultimately there was a rupture in leadership, where a person communicated to me their intention to deceive the product team. I remember the instruction that was given to me was, you tell them we're doing one thing and then run in the other direction. And the reason for that, I think, comes from couple of different areas. One, I think that person was more interested in their own development. The other piece of it is I think that they didn't trust the product team to deliver what they were promised to. And what they were really concerned about was if we didn't deliver, then we were going to get dinged for it when it came to performance evaluations. And so the instruction here was then get them out of our way so that we can at least have something to share that we did, rather than us being on the tail end and waiting and have nothing to show for us. And so that wouldn't work in a small
No.
organization. That would immediately be felt. And so in, I think, big enterprises, unfortunately, people can hide in a lot of different ways, rather than following your approach of over communicating and whatnot to be able to achieve the outcome.
What was that internal tension like for you then? Because you're obviously getting it from one area. I would imagine this person's senior
Yeah.
in the organization. You're senior as well. You manage a team. You work with a team. You support them. What's that internal tension like for you? Because when people think of negotiation, that's very much an internal negotiation you're having
Yes.
with yourself, with your teams on either side. What's that feel like on the inside? How'd you navigate that?
Yeah. So I was really direct with the person, which was I won't operate that way. And I tied it back to the core values of the company that I was working for at the time, which is that we were supposed to work as one team. My responsibility is to espouse those principles in any forum where I am operating accordingly. And so, I appreciate what she was saying. My takeaway was, let's voice these concerns with the product team, or with other stakeholders who should be hearing about that and helping us fix this situation. The reality is, without product and growth and customer success, I can't do my job. And so thinking that we can do it alone and run around them, I just think is typically the wrong strategy. I can't scale and do my job if not for others.
It's gonna be hard to build trust too, right? How are they gonna trust you to deliver the product or the feature set that their customers are telling them that they want, if we have a lot of mistrust internally or dishonesty or deceitful actions? Because let's face it, trust arrives in drips
Yes,
and leaves in buckets. And once that bucket's out, it's going to take a long time to drip back in.
totally.
One other thing I wanted to talk about is, all right, so let's say you've gotten a really cool feature request from the customer success team, the sales team, or the founder has a shower thought at 3 o'clock in the morning because they live with a mild sense of paranoia and they want to build something really cool. So they present to you this like super exciting feature, and you look at that feature and say 0% chance you're going to kick rocks. Obviously, you can't say that out loud. So have there been moments, I'm sure there have, where you've been presented the coolest feature in the world and you had to tell them, no way?
No, not
Ooh.
exactly. So my response to that is typically tell me more, and how can we figure out a way to get you what you want in stages. And that goes back to a lot of what we were talking about with de-risking. A common theme in engineering, or at least product engineering, is how can we ship things incrementally in small bets so that we can make really big investments over the long term. And with each of those small bets, that gives us signal from our end users, whether that's folks internally or externally, to make sure that we're on the right direction. There used to be this practice of where engineering teams or product teams used to ship really massive features over a series of months. Users wouldn't touch them until they were finally released, and they would get them and say, why did you build that? And so when I talk about how I like to operate, one of the things that I share is I'm allergic to ribbon cutting ceremonies. Because for me, those ribbon cutting ceremonies means that we spent a lot of time trying to build this massive feature. We likely didn't get a ton of validation, and it's riskier to do because it ends up being a 1-0, did this work, or is this the wrong thing that we built? And by that time, we've already sunk.
How did you start getting that philosophy, though? This whole, I don't want to do ribbon cutting ceremonies. There had to have been something in your career that has led you to that insight of minor releases with good product testing is better than major releases with very little.
Oh, I shipped so much crap. And I learned over weeks and months of building, and then finally having that be touched by users. I learned the hard way that, those big bets that I made were wrong. uh, and well-intentioned, but had I made smaller bets, de-risk so that we can learn more by making smaller decisions and releasing in smaller increments. I mean, that is the approach for success.
How do you balance that then, right? Because there's a lot of cachet around that whole ribbon cutting ceremony feature set. Hey, we're going to version 1.0, we have a major release, or 2.0 is a major release, but all of the incremental 1.1, 1.3, 1.5s get you there. So how do you balance that internally? Again, I'll go back to engineering with product, customer success, sales, and the founding team. They want the big banner. I want the sign on the bus in New York City talking about this 4.0 that we've just released.
Yeah.
But you're saying, yeah, that's cool, but like we got to get to like 0.5 first, get it in people's hands, have them talk about it. What's that balance like?
When you announce it officially, at whatever timeline you choose to announce it, that is just marketing, and you get to make that choice. So you can still have a ribbon to cut, but for me, the allergy to ribbon cutting ceremonies is when the ceremony precedes use. Or I'm fine with the banners and the ribbons, but let's get some users to touch it and get the validation that we need to be successful. And that goes back to a lot of the communication things that we talked about is, communicating and being clear and assertive and getting that into and respectful and getting that into the hands of our end users so that they can communicate back to us.
That's also another good point you brought up of you have we work with a lot of individuals. I've worked with a lot of individuals in my career where they want things to be perfect. How do I say the perfect thing? What's the perfect call script for me? What's the perfect way to position this thing? And so many people are so focused on what perfect is, it gets in the way of great. It gets in the way of good. It gets in the way of good enough. And I don't think people focus enough on how do I articulate something that is good or great in a way that allows me to explore. It allows me to not make any promises or commitments so I know exactly what perfect looks like. We talk about that a lot from a negotiation standpoint. It's you don't have to make promises or commitments, but I have to explore what we're discussing, why we're discussing, what are the underlying issues, what are the conflict points that are going to exist as a way to get to what great looks like. If I want to communicate effectively, I need to articulate my intent and ensure they interpret it that way. So perfect is the enemy of great. And more people need to focus on how do I be great? How do I communicate great? How do I deliver a small, great feature instead of a perfect, full release? I'm a bit of a nerd. I like playing a lot of video games. And that's why a lot of games are in early access.
Right.
It gives you an opportunity to test features, roll things out, break things, put them back together as a way to incrementally get to that ribbon cutting ceremony where now we've already shipped and tested all of those features, but now everyone else can see it because it's out of early access.
Right. I think there's also something about shipping something that isn't great, and maybe it's just good, or even if it's not good, being able to have the people you're building for see that you're making real effort to get to perfection, whatever that is. Something that somebody told me a long time ago is that the happiest engineers are the engineers who ship code. That's true. We merge our pull requests and there's momentum to that. So the momentum also of shipping small things, even if they're not perfect or great or even good, signals or hopefully builds trust with the people who we're building for to say, we're making a real effort to get you the thing that you need, even if it's not here yet. But the important piece when shipping things that are raw is that you're communicating or setting the expectations of, we're going to do our best to get you this thing. It's not going to be great. It probably is not going to be good either, but we want to understand how you're going to use it and make sure that there's enough signal for us to keep building it out. And that is often so appreciative, even if all that's just internal, but often even the external facing features that we build, they don't have to be polished for people to like them or use them, or even just build trust with the end user so that they know that there will be momentum to get the thing that they need.
I like to say a lot of the times, like, just give me something to react to. Like, I don't need a big thing for you to spend a tremendous amount of time on. Just give me something to react to. Then I can provide you really good feedback. So the next thing I react to is a little bit better and on the path that makes the most sense. So I want you to talk about maybe kind of your development philosophy. There's a lot of words out there. Again, I'm a nerd. So you have sprints, you have
Hmm.
crunch, you have all these different words and phrases people talk about that the engineering team does, that developers do,
Hmm.
that you can communicate that internally really well, but the end user might not know exactly what that means from a communication standpoint. So maybe can you talk just broad brushstrokes about what a development process looks like? What are some common things that developers and engineers do, and why that matters from an internal communication standpoint?
Yeah, so we do a lot of listening to our customers to be able to get signal on some of the things that they're having pain points around or features that they're looking to get built to enable some kind of capability for them. That's then synthesized or aggregated into a set of requirements. I mean, that's really important for teams to then do a hard think of uh, is are there pieces of our process that would better serve us? And if so, let's change them or add them.
You mentioned AI, so I'd be remiss not to at least talk about AI with an engineer specifically.
Yeah.
One of the really cool things that I've discovered about AI is, in its truest sense, we just figured out the language of machines. I can just talk to a machine now the way you learned Arabic or the way anyone else speaks any other human language. We figured out a way to talk to machines. How has that changed your job and that entire industry in the way that now we can use natural language to talk to a machine to give us an output?
Yeah, I mean, now anybody can code up an app or get early feedback. Whether your app can scale is a whole separate
Sure.
idea, or whether or not it can be maintained is a separate thought. Probably soon, we're going to be at a point where, yeah, I mean, anybody can release an app that scales, and we'll see what that evolution looks like and how it changes the market. Now more than ever, it is so cheap to experiment, to be able to get feedback from your end user. One thing that we talk about is that I've talked about with a lot of people, both at the current company where I am, but also other friends who are in engineering, is how much we love the craft of engineering, the way that code is kind of like a puzzle, like any language. I mean, machine or spoken, for us to figure out and use to be able to achieve an outcome. But that's the really key piece: is that the code that we used to write was always intended to serve a purpose, which was not for the craft of engineering itself. It was for the achievement of the outcome for the end user. And so this is great. Anybody can now achieve the outcome that they're looking for the end user, granted with some help, likely from engineers in the short term. Couple that with the piece about how experimentation is really cheap. The achievement of the outcome gets all the better when you're able to make those cheap experiments and get really early and easy feedback from your end users.
Now we layer in agentic AI, and these different agents are going out there and doing work internally. Talk me through how you think about agentic AI, because you said, I've managed teams before, human teams, I would imagine. Now you're managing a team of agents.
Yeah.
That has to have its own nuances and how you align the team, so to speak, on how to do those each individual tasks. So, do you have some design philosophies on ensuring all of these agents know exactly what to do, when to do it, and how? Because we talk to clients all the time. They're obsessed with AI, they're obsessed with agents, but then they build all these agents, credits and tokens go through the roof. They don't know exactly what they're doing with them.
Yeah.
So, do you have some design philosophies around how you deploy agents to support you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so different from working with humans, which is if you're upfront and over communicate, granted, there is a context window for agents that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, thankfully, but not so different from humans in that I spend most of my time with my agentic team, making sure that we're aligned on what the outcome is and exploring different avenues or trade-offs by which we could build the outcome that we're looking to achieve. And so I'd say the planning process, and each one of these tools has the ability to do that. The planning process probably takes the most amount of time. If we're aligned from the beginning on what the end goal is, the likely ways in which we can achieve that end goal, then it makes it so much easier. I mean, especially makes it easier if I tell the agent to work on really small goals and not so that we can, I know it's not building trust, but maybe it is.
It
And
is.
then having more confidence in each of these agents as they build out what it is that I'm looking for. in small iterations. So that, I mean, that is a really important piece is the planning process.
We spent a lot of time on that too. So and we're very heavily invested in AI. We think AI enables humans to be the best version of themselves, the best worker, frees up their thinking time, their strategy time. It really does save a tremendous amount of time when you can automate or make agentic menial tasks.
Yeah.
And the philosophies that we've been able to discover for ourselves internally is you have to treat them like they're their own employee
Hmm.
with a very specific and clear job description.
Yeah.
And if you can build a team like that, we tried experimenting with the super agent, right? That it does like everything.
Yeah.
But then it scours all of our tech stack, takes an incredible amount of time, an incredible amount of resources, and you don't trust the output.
Yeah.
But when you have these very clear small asks, it allows you to trust the output consistently. You're thinking about them, their own deployed team, and it really does help us scale and free up our time. I would love a world where the whole, 8-hour workday, which is nonsense, we just kind of decided it's going to be 8 hours,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be 8 hours anymore because we can outsource some of these menial tasks and small tasks to an AI agent that gives us back hours of thinking time to bring the best version of ourselves to that work. Like, how do you see agents allowing humans to be more strategic or even just become the best version of themselves that they can be while they outsource some of these smaller tasks?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that then I can do is focus on the strategic, not the tactical. And so as long as we're aligned in the beginning, I'm communicating what my plan is. I'm refining that plan with the agent, just like I would with any human who I was working with. It sounds a little funny to say human, but yeah, that's what I'm hoping then would free me up so that I could focus on the more strategic, critical pieces, communication with customers, so that I can get their feedback and then feed that into the cycle. That's how I think about it. I wonder how long it'll be the case that I think about it that way, because there are so many advances in this space that there may be a point where human in the loop just isn't nearly as important as what it is today. There is another piece about building agentic products, not just using kind of agentic solutions, but using it too, is being able to show the receipts. Receipts, not how big was my OpenAI or Anthropic bill, but how did you arrive at the conclusions that you did given the plan that I gave you? And so we think a lot about the observability. It's kind of like a postmortem for the agent, so that I really understand as it was working through the product, not coding up the product, but the agent being the product itself. How did it do the reasoning? And you see that in any of the integrated development environments where if you use Cursor or if you use Claude Code, it's telling you what it's doing over time. And at any time, you can go back to that session and take a look to see what it was doing to understand its thought process. For people building agentic products, not just AI enabled, but agentic products, those receipts, what it was thinking, when it was thinking it, when it took new instruction, who contributed to those instructions, are critical. And that also is a contributor to building trust in that feature.
There are things that we as humans can learn a lot about. How do we articulate our thought process? So anyone out there that's using AI agents, when you go through the reasoning and you read specifically, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Oh, wait a minute, that's not exactly what the user asked. The user asked this thing. I need to go back to the drawing board. I'm going to start fresh. I'm going to add on to this. No, I'm going to wipe the whole slate clean, and I'm going to do this thing instead.
Right.
I think there's a lot that we as humans can learn from observing how a machine, an AI, thinks and reasons, because like we talked about at the beginning, if we want to articulate our intent in a way that the other person interprets it 100%, I have to think about what my intent is.
Yes.
And how do I articulate it? So when you're building agents, it's also really good training to say, how would I tell someone to do this task as clearly and as succinctly as possible? Because if you can do that, you are much more likely to get a better output, instead of just giving vague instructions and then effectively holding their feet to the fire when they don't do the thing that you want, but that you didn't know how to say.
Right, exactly. And on the tail end of that, which is being able to then also share with your stakeholders, how you arrived at certain conclusions, you can learn that from the agent too. What we expect of those agents is also something that we should expect of ourselves. Providing our reasoning and thought process and artifacts that we can look back at is something that we humans can also do and learn from agents, as our expectations of them is the same.
I think there's really no better time than there ever has been to build and scale an organization if you do it the right way. And we have a very firm belief on AI. AI is not a replacement, it's an enablement tool that helps humans become and deliver their best work. And the AI is not there to replace, it's there to supplement. And if we use those tools, we can then elevate the work in significant ways, because I can save 90 minutes to 2 hours of my day that I don't need to do anymore, that something else can support me on, which is, I think, is just a dramatic opportunity.
Somebody who used to report to used to talk about, actually, when I was at Onaroll, head of engineering, my boss, the CEO, used to talk a lot about giving away his Legos. And so I think yes and no to what you said, which is not a replacement, it's a supplement, or it's a tool. I'm not sure. I think that what it's going to do is change our job function or our focus. And so we might still have titles of software engineer or whatever it might be. But the function or what the day-to-day looks like is going to be fundamentally different, and it will absolutely replace some of the core things that we thought and were precious about in our jobs. So the kind of process or the thing that people are, I think, struggling with, I know that I struggle with this, is giving away my Legos to this agentic user so that they can do the things that I would normally do, so that I can then focus on other things. And that's okay. And we're going to have to be okay with it because the market is changing.
Yeah. And listen, I'm not naive to think that AI is not going to replace some jobs. It's going to replace a significant amount of jobs. It will create many other jobs.
Right.
It will enable us to do our jobs a lot better with a lot less hours.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a disrupting force. You see it now. Organizations are laying off 5 to 25% of their workforce. These aren't small companies. These are massive institutions that are laying off thousands, if not tens of thousands of people because they got a machine to do that work at almost parity.
Right.
Which it's going to cause a tremendous amount of disruption. And organizations really need to think about, how do I communicate that?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there is a good example out there right now of any organization communicating that really well. They're trying to really fight through this comms plan and this PR potential nightmare of laying off tens of thousands of people. But we are at that inflection point now where the technology is there. So if you're starting a business, you really have to think about, how are you leveraging AI?
Absolutely.
If you're running a business, you need to think about what that comms and PR plan is to value the human workforce that you have and enable them, while also being mindful of there are other tools that can do this incredibly well.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's right.
Any, Zach, closing thoughts you wanted to share with the audience about your philosophies? Could be as it relates to negotiation, communication, or the life lessons you've had as an engineer at some really cool organizations.
Yeah, so I'd say one, focus on the outcome. When we get lost on what the outcome is, what it is that we're trying to achieve at the end, we end up getting distracted with some of the things that we end up doing in order to achieve it, and that makes negotiations a lot harder. Two, I tend to think relationships aren't zero sum. And so even when we think that we'll never encounter somebody ever again, my experience has been very different. You end up encountering them in a lot of different ways, professionally or personally. And so there kind of is no excuse for being a jerk. I think there's a really important piece about thinking about what the longevity of that relationship looks like, because you're going to meet them again. And then third is how to collaborate or work with other people to figure out ways to de-risk and identify what the trade-offs are so that you can achieve the outcome that you're looking for in the best way possible.
We love those three. Zach, thanks for joining us on Getting Aligned. Thank you for introducing the audience. So hopefully a brand new way to look at negotiation from an internal perspective. It was great having you on.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome.